A lot of people have made healing their center of attention, their center of focus. They're always trying to heal. Right. And a lot of times when I notice within my clients too, they've already healed or they've already healed the past. They're just still stuck in trying to heal because they're not growing from the past. Because growing is also healing. And so growth means that you're letting go of those past ideas, the past triggers and so forth, but also you're grabbing onto a newer way of thinking, a newer paradigm, a newer focus for yourself. A lot of people who are in this healing modes keep having these past triggers manifest in their life to where they're still having same health issues or same health circumstances that keep coming up because they're just responses to how you're being triggered by past karma or past trauma in a sense. So the healing means you have to grow out of that. Many people think healing just means they have to keep focusing on praying for the pain to go away. We need to understand a lot of times the pain are just conditional manifestations of the triggers. So, for example, like I can slap my wrist, it turns red. That's a manifestation. I slap the wrist. If I don't slap my wrist, it won't turn red anymore. Or if I pinch myself, it'll turn red and it'll bruise, if I pinch it hard. And that bruising is a manifestation of how I pinched myself. If I stop pinching myself, there no longer will be bruised. There'll be nothing to heal. So you guys have to stop putting salt on your wounds because you're not allowing yourself to grab onto finding the power within those circumstances to grow from them. The physical brain works this way. If we have a challenge and the challenge is over, we don't learn from the challenge, that challenge still stays in the subconscious on a loop. It still stays in a repetition. So therefore, we're still carrying that thought process with us until we allow ourselves to say, okay, we're going to take this thought process and channel it this way. I've been abused, and so therefore I've been taken advantage of, so I can't trust anybody, but I'm going to move on. If I'm saying I can trust people, I'm just going to be more strong on myself and protective of myself and to put my foot down and meet people who actually are accepting of me, not so much taking advantage of me. That's how we create a new thought process. And we also understand that that thought process is the key from the manifestation of the past. It's the key of the trauma. It's the key of the karma that we need to pull out of it. Many times people don't pull that key out. They're just trying to get over the past, get over what happened to them. But you can't get over what's happened to you if you keep focusing on what happened to you. Right? Oh my God, I've been abused. I've been abused. I've been abused. Oh, it hurts me. I've been abused. I got to get over it because you keep emphasizing you've been abused. And so therefore the healing is never going to happen. You can have, prayer done on you. You can do, energy releases. You can do rituals. It won't happen if you keep going back to focusing on the abuse that you've experienced. You stay in that cycle. You come to terms with by stop emphasizing that and saying, where do I need to go from here? What do I need to turn that into? See, that's the healing. The healing is actually redirecting. The healing is actually growing and expanding from it. That's what healing is. And the mind would automatically, by default, go back to the unresolved. This is why a lot of people think a past relationship that they have, where they keep thinking about them. Oh, I think I miss them. I'm like, you don't miss them. There is symbolic representation in your mind of an unresolved that you have that you keep going back to. Remove the person from the parameter and look at the emphasis of the circumstance, the emotional deprivation that you've had in that past. That person is a reminder that you have not resolved that. So a lot of people say they're missing the person. I'm like, no, you're missing the lesson. And they're just popping up to remind you to look at it, to resolve it. Right now, during this time of conflict and time of opposition and competitive ideas, we have to start focusing on the growth of ourselves, and kind of healing also means you're allowing yourself to shut down that which has been contaminating your energy. And that means your choices can be also bringing to you the contamination of energy because you're still repeating the same patterns or thinking the same way. Because if you haven't evolved from a certain modality of the past, your brain will always seek it out in other areas of your life. It would start seeking out to resolve it. Okay, well, if I didn't learn the lesson to this abuse, well, then I'll pick this abuse here. Maybe I'll learn from this. That's how it works. That's how the brain is programmed to function. Please don't let yourself keep replacing the trauma with new trauma until and I always say, it always gets too big to where you're forced to focus on yourself. A lot of times people are trying to heal, but they don't. They're just replacing the trauma, and they end up making things worse to where they manifest another health issue or another detrimental circumstance where they have to focus on, oh my gosh, I'm in desperate times. I got to focus on myself. It would become that great until you're forced into focusing on self-care. So we hear self-care all the time. We have to understand what self-care really means. Self-care means that you're preserving your energetic space emotionally, psychologically, and energetically, but you're not allowing people around you to influence you in ways that go outside of the agenda that you're doing moving forward. Because your agenda should be, well, I'm going to be self-sufficient. I'm taking these past circumstances, I'm converting that into a powerful experience for myself, and so I can actually create more that I couldn't do before. You're eliminating things around you that don't coincide with that agenda and that growth. When you start growing, you start really healing and growing, and you're starting to focus on the self, be more center focused, the people that are not supportive of you will make you feel guilty for that. Oh, you're so selfish. You only think about yourself. Well, the people who love you would encourage you to do the same, because people who are successful are also focusing on themselves and contributing. And when you need to focus on yourself, people that love you would encourage that. I think right now, this is why we're having massive divides right now, because, we think that everybody's collectively in sync, but we're not. And I just think that we've always been out of sync with each other. And now it's just, these times are just exposing that. And I think that exposing that dichotomy that we have is going to help us to really resolve our karma that we've had on a grander scale, so that we can actually be more in tune to our rhythm, and thus having others be in tune with our rhythm too. So the more conflict that we have, the more we tend to want to pull away. And that's a good thing. We need to be pulling away right now, especially from each other with competing ideas and fighting energy. That's not changing when we keep fighting any longer, especially with fighting with yourself to not look at the karma or resolve the karma. It's really important that we think of it this way. It's really important that we understand that protection means boundaries. People say, I'm just going to protect myself. I'm going to do sage. I'm going to sage my house. And I'm like, yeah, it's a ritual. But we got to be clear about and specify what protection really means. What do those boundaries really mean for you? And some of your boundaries need to be that you're not listening to that coworker's gossip any longer. You're not allowing yourself to feel bad for someone so they keep dumping on you because they need you to listen to them. These are the things that you have to start being aware of. It's a very simple level of things. It could be that maybe you're just listening to a radio show that's just negative all the time. That you're not giving yourself any more dynamic of inspiration, any dynamic of perspective. Not that it's bad, and I'm not going to say it's bad to watch reality TV and trash shows. Sometimes there's a space for that, right? But if you're only consuming yourself with that type of energy, where else do you think you're getting inspiration from? It's time that we stop being so collectively focused for a moment, take a step back, pull back a little bit from being so collectively focused, because I've been seeing a lot of people during this time losing themselves. And losing themselves to maybe ideas or values that have been created from fragmentation. But if you were to take a step back, you might realize those values, they are not actually significant for you, or they're not even that important. If you take an objective approach and look at it, you might say, I've had these values, but they're really not doing anything for me, or they're actually not so valuable. Right? So it's really time to start looking at that now, because I see a lot of people losing themselves and just repeating things that they don't really truly believe, and they don't really truly feel. It's not really too representative of themselves. So we have to be on guard with this. We have to protect ourselves from being heavily influenced and also swayed by either people's perceptions of us or people's acceptance of us. We can't be swayed by that any longer. Because if you ask yourself, all the time you spent arguing with somebody, all the time you spent trying to prove yourself to somebody, all the time you spent in those long text messages or those long comments online, what else could your time have been spent doing if you weren't doing those things? When we look from that perspective, then what happens, we could take a step back from the collective, recenter, refocus, come back into the collective, and then things will make sense. We'll be more receptive to other people's points of view, and vice versa.